Welcome to Around the Blockchain. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Awesome. All right, Greg, welcome to Around the Blockchain. If you can just introduce yourself to the viewers for me.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me. Name is Greg Oakford. So I am NFT obsessed. I'm the co-founder of NFT Fest Australia, and I am also a senior marketer and look after a team of 5 at Golf Australia. So working in the sports industry. That's me.
Yeah, awesome. So you currently work full-time in the sports industry, and NFTs is kind of like a bit of a side project or sort of side interest for yourself, but you're obviously quite like interested in it. How did you kind of stumble across NFTs? And then can you also maybe talk a little bit about your day job as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with how I stumbled upon NFTs. It was probably back in January or February. I think the first time I sort of heard of NBA Top Shot was maybe around the September, October 2020. I was seeing it pop up on Twitter a lot, but ultimately I didn't really dive deep into it at the time. And I was reading a Forbes article back in February this year that was sort of the top 50 most influential people in blockchain. And I was sort of scrolling, it was somewhere in the 30s, and I can't remember her name now. And it was someone either from the NBA or from Dapper Labs, and it sort of went into a little bit of the success that Top Shot was having. And I sent a screenshot to a buddy of mine, Steve Ballas, who's the CEO of Blockchain Australia, and said, "What is this?" And he replied with, "It's NFT. It's NFTs. They're blowing up." And sort of since that moment, which is sort of 6-7 months now, I've just been obsessed with learning more and what's behind it. And yeah, I thought that I was going to cool the jets on it, because I do have a habit of sometimes getting quite enthusiastic about a particular topic or whatever I stumble upon, and I go hard for 2 or 3 months and then I burn myself out and I'm on to the next thing. This one has had real stickiness for me. I don't see it ending anytime. In terms of the day job, yeah, currently, as I said, working in Golf Australia, sort of heading up the marketing there, which is a really fun gig. Before that, it was basketball. I am a sports junkie, and you sort of said, how do you integrate them? Well, Tiger Woods released the news that he'll be dropping 10,000 Tiger Woods moments essentially through Tom Brady's company Autograph next week. So there's a lot happening in golf already. There's a lot of discussions, and there's a lot of discussions happening across the board with sport. And there's no doubt in my mind that every single sport and sporting club that has some size or brand about it will have an NFT strategy in the next 12 to 36 months. So we are early right now. And when I mention it to some of my colleagues, there's a lot of faces that don't really know what I'm talking about. But I like being early. I thought I was late in February, but I have quickly learned that I am quite early.
Totally agree. When you have those people staring back at you with blank faces, how do you, or like, what's your sort of go-to spiel when you sort of describe what an NFT is to somebody?
Yeah, so I think the people that are closest to me know that they probably won't be able to avoid an NFT discussion at some point in time. But ultimately, I'm not in the business of sort of convincing the people that are not ready to sort of be open to it. And I think that's anyone on sort of the NFT crypto journey. Until you're sort of willing to open your mind and release a little bit of bandwidth in that brain of yours, you're just not going to grasp the concept. There's too many strings to its bow. So anyone that does have some curiosity, I'm getting a lot more texts in the last sort of 4 to 6 weeks asking about, what's rarity tools, and where do you go to buy one, and how do you set up a MetaMask, and all these type of things. But ultimately, back to sort of my work and my work colleagues, I mean, it's an organization will certainly be open to the discussions. We're having some discussions around our high performance team at the moment, and sort of saying, well, what does it look like for the sort of 15-year-old golfer that could be the next major winner? And what would an NFT look like for a sort of Hannah Green that won a major recently, or a Minwoo Lee, et cetera, of the golfing world. So yeah, it's exciting times, but as we touched on, it's still very, very early. So there's a lot of people to get their head around.
Absolutely. Look, out of curiosity, what sort of NFTs are you into personally? Like, is there any sort of specific projects that you're, heavily into, or that you really sort of like the look of?
Yeah, so in a way, I'll sort of label my learning curve in NFT land as being a bit of a degenerate. I started off with one, and I've probably up to a lot now. I have a lot in my wallet that have sort of been airdropped on the Polygon and things like that. But the journey really started with Vfriends. Before that in March, actually, I bought some stuff off Wax, but ultimately, I don't think I've been back into that wallet since. But from an Ethereum sort of perspective, it did start with Vfriends. I had sort of helped out. I had a little bit of time off my sort of golf job earlier this year, some annual leave, and being based in Melbourne, I had nothing to do and nowhere to go. So I helped Steve out with an event called Blockchain Week, which was a 4-day event spanning across Sydney and Melbourne. And look, I didn't really know who was who in the zoo in terms of just the general blockchain ecosystem, and that was a real baptism of fire to sort of. I got on the tools and ran all the social media for Blockchain Australia that week, and it really sort of threw me into the deep end to, establish some of the characters in the scene. There was a little bit of talk on NFTs at Blockchain Week, but not a lot, maybe sort of 10% of the content. And it wasn't until after sort of Blockchain Week, I started writing some blogs on my LinkedIn page, just trying to make sense of all this world. And ultimately, as I sort of made those connections in my own brain, it was about the time Gary had started sort of spruiking Vee Friends. And fortunately, I've followed Gary's content since probably 2013 or 14. So the sort of, when I send a video to friends and, the response will be snake oil salesman or this, that, or the other, like I can see past that. And I was very fortunate to meet Gary in 2019 as well at an event in Melbourne through sort of Empathy Wines and Vino Mofo. And I was just sort of fired up about, okay, if the thesis is to bet on a jockey, I'd be very comfortable to bet on Gary and spend a little bit of money just to kick the tires of this whole NFT thing and see where it sort of takes me. Well, that was provided a big gateway drug, the Vee Friends, for me, because it didn't stop there. And then sort of shortly after that, I started to get into some projects and probably sort of got in relatively early with the Bored Apes, and that sort of just exploded, especially recently. And then just started kicking the tires of many other projects. I didn't jump into Meebits when they launched, but I knew they were backed by Lava Labs. And again, sort of back to that jockey thesis, I thought, geez, if they're the ones behind CryptoPunks and autoglyphs that I knew to a lesser degree at the time, I thought might be a smart bet to just grab one as the prices drop. So I remember I grabbed the Meebit for sort of 0.83 of an ETH, maybe end of May or sort of start of June. And then, as I kicked the tires of these projects, I was getting more and more conviction in the space. And I was learning a lot, and I've spent a lot of money on various courses and online this and online that over the journey. And I was quite comfortable if everything went to zero and I'd spent a couple of grand, then so be it. If it was going to accelerate my learning curve, because I'm a strong believer of having skin in the game. And I was then fortunate enough to sort of jump into the Meebits DAO group that was forming. And I'll touch on one of our guests that we've got at an event that I'll speak to you about in a second. Kai Garney, who's an OG in the space. And, there was sort of the offer there to jump in as a founding member, only 200 spots as a founding member of the Meebits DAO. And I thought, wow, what a great opportunity to get a seat at a table with some people that I could really learn from. And have a great group sort of in the Discord. So couldn't part with my ETH quick enough to sort of get in that group. And I feel like that sort of paid off in accelerating not only my own learning curve, but just, getting in conversations that might have taken me otherwise a few years to sort of establish myself in.
Yeah, awesome. It's funny you mentioned Vee Friends. Obviously, we've had a bit of a chat offline via LinkedIn. That was one of the first projects I sort of got involved with as well. Again, very similar sort of thesis to what you've just mentioned. anything Gary sort of does seems to, the guy kind of knows what he's doing, to put it bluntly. So yeah, I was pretty bullish on that particular project. What Vee Friends characters did you buy?
Yeah, so I have accountability was a trait that I really liked. So I ended up going sort of the accountability anteater. And for those that don't know the Vfriends project, this is going to sound some weird and funky names, but yeah, so that was the first one. A funny story on the Vfriends. I was at my girlfriend's house the night it launched, and I think it was 3:30 in the morning Melbourne time that the project kicked off. And it was a Dutch auction, which I didn't really know a lot about a Dutch auction up until that drop. And yeah, ultimately the first time I ever clicked MetaMask, it come up and it was going to charge me $29,000 in gas. I still have a screenshot of it. So I remember there was a bit of an issue with that. And in the Discord, in the Vee Friends Discord, they were talking about that, make sure that you decline that. Not that I would have had 29,000 worth of ETH in there at the time. So that was a big learning experience. So I actually didn't get to get anything. I sort of sat on the computer for about 45 minutes at 4 o'clock in the morning, trying to get one, but ultimately I sort of forgot that the price drops over time. So it wasn't until the next day that I bought sort of my first one, and similar to those that have bought their first NFT, you can't stop with one. And I just thought, geez, I wouldn't mind picking up another one. So, I went the Alert Ape, just one of the cores, which I sort of got just above floor price. Yeah, my only regret is not buying more and not buying more of the sort of rarer ones. But anyway, I'm still in there. And like I said, I owe a lot to sort of the Vfriends project and Gary's conviction in the space that rubbed off to me enormously.
Yeah, it's a funny story. I did the same thing. Obviously, it was a different time zone here in Perth. Jumped on, I think it must have been, so if it's a 2-hour difference, it would have been about 5:30 in the morning. Mucked around with MetaMask for a while. Obviously, like you've just mentioned, the gas fees were insane. There was obviously some kind of issue going on, and waited for about 45 minutes. And then I just kind of thought, okay, these things are probably going to sell out like really fast. So I ended up coughing up 2.4 ETH for just a core at the time. And then I sort of sat on it for a few days and I was like, I kind of really regret doing that. Like I should have just waited, not obviously knowing that. I knew what a Dutch auction was, but I didn't understand that, okay, like these things aren't going to sell out straight away, which I'd sort of expected them to. But obviously now, like the project's sort of gaining legs, and I think the floor price is around about 15.5 ETH just for a core at the moment. So I think there's a lot of people, especially in that Discord group, which is growing exponentially, are predicting like big things from this project. So same as you, I kind of owe quite a bit to Gary and obviously Vee Friends. Let's move on. I want to talk to you a little bit about NFT Fest Australia. So you're obviously organising this event. It was originally supposed to be an in-person event in Melbourne. Obviously with COVID and that sort of thing, that's not happening. So you sort of switched it to fully online. But talk to me a little bit about that. You've got some great people in the lineup. And then I guess what's the goal for the event as well? What are you guys sort of looking to do and sort of help people out with?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Yeah, so NFT Fest Australia, it's an event that I've co-founded with Rochelle Cox. The event's being supported by Blockchain Australia, and doing a lot of work helping us sort of secure guests and providing some guidance is Steve Ellis, who I mentioned before, the CEO of Blockchain Australia. So, in a way, this is sort of Steve's way of giving back to Rochelle and I, who had played sort of a role in the success of Blockchain Week in April earlier this year. So really the basis of the event was, NFTs were the conversation. They still are the conversation a few months ago, and things were really bubbling along. We were seeing sort of headlines make it through to, shows like The Project here in Australia, mainstream media, et cetera, and, different shows around like people buying CryptoPunks for this many million, and then the Beeple sale in March, obviously that sort of kicked off a lot of headlines as well. And I was sort of down the rabbit hole a lot on various projects, I should say. And I was teaching a few of my friends that were open to the discussion of sort of what was happening and what I was observing. And then I sort of started putting my sports cap on and, thinking of Top Shot again. And I'm going, I've got a pretty strong network in the Australian sports industry, and I work with a number of charities as well. Like an ex-colleague of mine is the head of content at Movember. And I just started to think all these organizations, whether it's Movember or sporting club or sporting league, whatever, like, if this was a moment in time where it was the mid to late 90s and someone was saying to you, hey, come and learn about these website things and e-commerce, in hindsight, that would be a really smart move. And if it was the same thing 2006, 2007, and, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube are emerging, and someone said to you, hey, do you want to come be part of an event that's going to accelerate your learning curve to something that you're going to play in for the next 10 to 20 years, would that be a smart idea? I think the overwhelming answer would be yes. And this is the moment in time for NFTs and Web3 right now in 2021. So the moment for Movember, the moment for the NBL, for all the sports, golf, etc., is maybe you don't launch something in the next 3 to 6 months, but at least start having the conversations. Because as you would know, Ryan, there's a steep learning curve to sort of NFTs and Web3, a lot more than sort of a Web2 world. So the basis of the event, there's no sponsors. It's all about content. We've had to knock money back essentially because there's been people knocking at our door saying, how can I sort of get a seat at the table, or can we attach our brand to it? And, they're very nice offers, and sort of we've been flattered by those, but ultimately it's made it an easier pitch for us to sort of some of our world-class speakers to say, we're not making money off this. This is a labor of love. We're all passionate about NFTs. That to me has been a critical point to get sort of the talent in our lineup. I'm touching a lot on sort of the newbies that we'll have to this event. But ultimately, we want it to be a place too that we bring all the OGs and the people that have been in the thick of it, for whether it's 6 to 8 months like me, or whether it's been sort of a couple of years like others. We want it to sort of tick all those boxes. So we're really excited. And yeah, you touched on the sort of in real life component. Originally, it was going to start, I should say, it was going to be a Melbourne-based event, but also have an online component for our interstate and international guests. But COVID restrictions here in Melbourne, Australia, prohibit that for this one. So it's all online now. It'll be sort of what started out to be maybe a 4 to 6 hour event is looking like, we haven't released all the times yet, Ryan, but happy to sort of give you a little bit of an exclusive to say the day will most likely run from sort of 10 a.m. Australian Eastern time. So here in Melbourne, right through to around about 6 or 7 o'clock. And that's to sort of accommodate for the multiple time zones we've got with our speakers. We've got Americans, both on the West Coast and East Coast time zones. We've got, speakers from obviously Australia, Hong Kong, and then we've got a contingency from Europe and the UK. So the ones from the Europe and UK will generally be sort of in the latter part of the day, and the Americans in the earlier part of the day. So we're really excited to bring it to everyone. There's been an overwhelmingly positive response from both speakers and attendees, and we hope everyone gets a little bit of value out of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it looks like the lineup is really, really good. Like, you've got a lot of people that you've obviously already released information about that are obviously speaking at the event. Can you talk to me a little bit about a couple of the speakers, and then I guess who you're sort of excited to hear from?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the wonderful things about this particular event is it goes quite broad. We've got everyone from politicians to lawyers to IP experts to heads of sport like Jeremy Loliga at the NBL, and then we've got a lot of the projects as well. And these are sort of the areas that I've been spending a lot of time in, sort of over the last 4 to 6 months in lockdown, sort of learning about the dynamics of various NFT projects. So, if I give you an example, like Adam McBride, if you're not aware of Adam, he sort of goes by the original NFT archaeologist, but Adam's been in the space for a while. But what Adam's been doing is sort of helping older projects, 2016, 2017, 2018 projects, particularly on the Ethereum blockchain that may have not sort of got much traction back then, but he's been unearthing these projects, and people have been rushing in because people are seeing that these are historically important projects, and they're essentially going to be artifacts in sort of the coming years and decades to come. So we're really excited to sort of have Adam speak, Seb from Crypto Arte, which is one of the early projects that Adam unearthed. And that particular project is a sort of essentially it's an art project that displays the history of early Ethereum starting back from 2015. So depicting that through art, it's a generative art project that actually predates autoglyphs. So that particular project is interesting in my mind. Kai Ghani is the guy I mentioned before that is the founder of MeBits DAO and probably the sort of the closest link we have to Lava Labs at the NFT Fest. But, Kai is behind the recent drop of Savage Droids. He's an high up creative in Netflix that wrote a blog post last week that said why I left Netflix to sell JPEGs on the internet. So Kai's got a really exciting story, and I shouldn't miss Maddie, aka DCL Blogger. Maddie is arguably one of sort of the most recognized NFT minds in Australia and globally for that matter. The founder of the MetaKey. I remember actually watching Maddie talking to Gary Vee back in sort of maybe April or May, just before the Vee Friends launch. So we're really excited to have Maddie. Animoca Brands is another one, and Vive. Vive are bringing sort of Marvel fandom to the NFT world. So we have some great speakers. I've sort of got the list in front of me as I look off the screen here, Ryan, and I'm probably missing a few people. Abby Abstract. Abby's got a really cool story to tell. Worked at a gallery in the UK before COVID. Had all of these physical paintings, had no idea what to do with them, wasn't getting any sort of revenue, and stumbled upon NFTs during COVID last year, and is now selling out drops on every known platform possible, and it's got some really cool artwork to show. So hearing Abby's story as well as an artist, I think is really good. So yeah, we have a lot of people lined up, and I'd encourage anyone that's got some curiosity to head to nftfest.com.au, and you can sort of see the full speaker lineup there and agenda. And I should say, sorry, Ryan, I'm waffling on a little bit, but I've got a massive oversight here. Is the World of Women project. So the World of Women project, as you know, has caught fire really the last, I think it's only been launched for 6 to 8 weeks. I remember I minted 5 myself. Unfortunately, I sold 3 for a pretty low price as the project sort of went up, and I forgot that I had them on the market. But I've still sort of got 2 in my stable. But the World of Women project was one of the projects, the first speakers that we approached. Yam, the head artist, and Raf. So we had a Zoom meeting with them maybe about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and they've been lovely to deal with, and they've got a real story to tell around sort of empowering women and having amazing art, but also some stuff built in their smart contract where the secondary sales revenue goes to different causes that they want to support. So we're really excited to hear from the World of Women.
Is Gary Vaynerchuk making an appearance?
Not at this stage, but we still have 1 more week to work on Gary. So we might have something in the works. Maybe it's not Gary, but maybe it's someone close to Gary. So I don't want to give too much away, but yeah, we would love to have Gary. So Gary, obviously, if you're watching, I know you're a big fan of the Around the Block blockchain podcast. So, we can find a spot for you.
Absolutely. Look, there was a few obviously interesting points there. I wanted to kind of circle back to sport because I'm a bit of a sport head as well. Obviously, we've seen the rise of NBA Top Shots just go nuts, obviously, earlier this year. Do you sort of foresee something similar happening in the Australian sort of domestic sporting league, probably more in particular AFL and maybe even the NBL sort of avenues?
Yeah, no doubt. And I think we'll probably hear a little bit what some of the sports have got lined up, when we hear from the likes of Jeremy at the NBL next week. My understanding and sort of hearing murmurs and whispers that, I think most top tier sports in Australia are having conversations with various protocols and various sort of platforms that can bring to life NFT collections. The thing that's going to be interesting for me is, and I think that probably both worlds can exist, is the easier route is to just utilize some of your existing IP and make those sort of NFTs. And that's obviously been sort of the Top Shot model. But I think more and more, sports will consider, well, what does it look like to actually build out a community from scratch, utilizing NFT tokens? And can we bundle this with tickets? And I know the Dallas Mavericks via Mark Cuban, who's a big advocate of NFTs, is looking to sort of do season ticket holders as NFT. Which sort of like, when I look at a company like StubHub, that's sort of what they do, with a like bit of a resellers market. But there's a lot more you can do with the NFTs, obviously, and structuring royalties through the smart contracts, etc. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what the sports start with. My gut feel would be it's easier to sort of start with just turning a little bit of your IP into digital collectibles. But ultimately, what does it affect in terms of corporate hospitality moving forwards, and season tickets and memberships and things like that? So it's exciting. I mean, the opportunities are endless, but ultimately, I think, you have to sort of roll up your sleeves and taste it a little bit. And I think the easiest way probably to taste it initially will be just grabbing some existing IP and turning those into digital collectibles, and seeing what the sort of appetite from their audience is. And then maybe in future iterations, it becomes, okay, well, what does an NFT strategy look like that encompasses corporate hospitality, membership, tickets, etc., and access as well? You and I obviously are a big fan of the Vee Friends model, where it provides in real life access. And, the US Open tennis did that a couple of weeks ago. And ironically, Vayner NFT were behind that, where ultimately, you could buy an Andy Roddick sort of 1 of 20 card, but you could buy an Andy Roddick sort of experience where you go have a hit of tennis with him on Arthur Ashe Stadium. So, you're selling experiences as well as the sort of token. So it's going to be really interesting. And I think if you take a long-term vision and build out that community, and, there's obviously the opportunity to just keep adding value to the token. And I saw a tweet the other day that said crypto's killer feature is the airdrop. And I mean, I couldn't agree more. Like, it's just amazing what you can do with sort of well thought out airdrops and creating evangelists within your sort of community that you've initially built out. So I'm excited to see where sport takes it. I'm excited to be in that conversation as well in sort of my current role from a golf perspective. But very excited. I've got my tentacles everywhere, seeing what all the other sports are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Circling back to Vee Friends, are you going to take the opportunity to try and go to VCon if we can travel?
Yes, that's a hard yes. Yeah, that will be a hard yes. I'd love to experience that. It's sort of ironic that I had a big trip to the US, just that I cancelled 72 hours out from in March last year in 2020, and part of that was going to be sort of the South by Southwest experience. So I'd always wanted to sort of taste that particular conference. So, VCon, I think, sort of going down that route with its own flair. So yes, we'd love to be there. I think it's in May, isn't it?
Yes.
Next year. Yeah.
I think, 19th, 20th, 21st, somewhere around there in May.
Yeah. I think we should book version 2 of this show with you and I in May at VCon. That sounds good.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Look, is there anything that we haven't touched on that you wanted to discuss?
No, not necessarily. I just would encourage everyone, as I've mentioned. I don't know if I've actually mentioned the date, so that's a bit ordinary of me. But September 30th, Thursdays, 30th of September, for our American friends, it will be on the 29th, the night of the 29th, roughly from 10 a.m. to sort of 6:30 p.m. Eastern time in Australia. It's a free event, as I mentioned, all about content. We're certainly not expecting everyone to be glued to their screens. Some might be, but the day is designed to be a drop-in, drop-out session on video conference. So all attendees that sign up at nftfest.com.au will get a link in the next few days to that particular video link. We are hoping to record sessions, but we'd encourage you, just in case something happens, to be on live. And many guests will have a Q&A opportunity as well. So just encourage anyone with a curious mind, if you want to learn a little bit more about NFTs, nftfest.com.au.
Awesome. Greg, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. We will make sure that we link everything as well in the comments section and the description section of this podcast as well.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. And one last thing I should mention for those on crypto Twitter or just regular Twitter, follow at NFT Fest Oz, NFT Fest Oz, and you can get all the details there, including some giveaways. So thanks again, Ryan, for having me.
No worries. Thanks so much, Greg. Appreciate it.